Welcome to the Conversation Circle with Toni Preckwinkle, President of Cook County Board of Commissioners. I am Michelle Mason, President and CEO of Association Forum. We are very fortunate to have President Preckwinkle with us today. We appreciate her leadership and her service during these tumultuous times. We know her time is very valuable, so we look forward to the conversation we're having with her today on local and national events. We'd like to say a special thank you to Brian Bergadoni, who is the Association Forum's lobbyist, for inviting President Preckwinkle with us today. Last week was a very dark moment for our nation. There are few words to comprehend or understand the division of our country. At Association Forum, one of our core values is a welcoming environment. We are very committed to maintaining an environment that's inclusive, that values and respects differences and uniquenesses. We know that that makes us stronger as an organization, and it creates a strategic advantage. We are very committed to the association community, bringing our members together and having authentic dialogues where we can learn from each other, grow, and also provide resources and connections to navigate these uncertain times. So thank you, President Preckwinkle, for joining us today. We also have a panel discussion to provide reflections on how do we move forward as a community? How do we help to facilitate a civil society? So with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Paul Pomerance, the President and CEO of the American Society of Anesthesiologists and Chair-elect of the Association Forum Board of Directors. Welcome, Paul.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thanks to President Preckwinkle, who I'll introduce in just a moment, and also thanks to all of you for being here today. We have nearly 100 of you signed up, and looking forward to a very exciting program. This program will be in two parts. First, we'll have a half-hour conversation with President Preckwinkle, and then we'll move to a panel discussion of your colleagues. Words cannot really describe what we felt last week, what we saw and felt last week. You know, this discussion had been planned for a while, and our initial focus, and we'll still talk quite a bit about Cook County and Chicago and the challenges we face. But last week brought the whole situation in the country that's affecting us nationally and in our states and locally, very close to all of us. And I can't really describe the horror and sadness that we all feel and that Michelle described so well. As we move through today's program, President Preckwinkle's remarks, as well as the panel, we want this to be very interactive. Let me know your questions, and we'll make sure we'll do our best to get them answered. It's my pleasure to introduce President Preckwinkle. She is the 35th president of the Cook County Board and has served in that capacity since 2010. Forged with a passion for equity and equality, fiscal responsibility, and transparency, President Preckwinkle oversees the core of the nation's largest public health and hospital system and criminal justice system, as well as our beautiful Forest Preserve District. And looking forward to learning more about that in our discussion today. She was trained as an educator. President Preckwinkle served 2 decades in the Chicago City Council as alderman of the 4th Ward in the Hyde Park University of Chicago community, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from that same institution. Let's welcome President Preckwinkle to the Association Forum Conversation Circle. And President, thank you so much for being here today. If I could start and with just the question that's on everybody's minds about the impact of last week's horrific event in Washington that shook so many of us to the core. While it looks like the Constitution and democracy held their ground, we are at a critical time in our nation. And what's particularly interesting is, that what happened in the nation's capital was bad enough, but we see implications of this all around the country. What are your thoughts and emotions at this time?
Oh, I guess I have to say that I found last week's events profoundly disturbing. I'm a history teacher by profession, and you've undoubtedly heard by now that this is the first time that the Capitol has been breached in this way since the War of 1812, when the British attacked the Capitol, and in 1814 took it over. So it's a momentous and very disturbing day. disturbing moment, I should say, what we saw last week. And for me, I mean, in a way, worse than the breach of the Capitol and the behavior of the insurrectionists was the fact that 139 members of the House and 8 senators refused to accept the vote of the Electoral College, installing Joe Biden as president of the United States. Elected representatives of the people chose to ignore for the first time, and this magnitude for the first time, I think, in our country's history. And so that is extremely disturbing to me, and that the crowd included white nationalists, white supremacists. The enduring memory for me is the folks who got on top of one of the statues waving Confederate flags. A very sad day and very disturbing day for our country.
Thank you for sharing those remarks. And we, as we go through the questions and discussion, we may come back to this, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about our current moment relative to the pandemic and the economy and really beginning to reopen Cook County. How do you see the county's role in the reopening of the region for events and tourism? And I'll add that that's a primary focus of our members who convene many large events.
So the first thing I will say that I'm afraid you're not going to find what I share with you comforting, but I'm going to try to be honest about where we are. The public health professionals tell us that we need basically a 70% vaccination rate in order to have herd immunity. And we had vaccines available in the middle of December, and it's now almost mid-January, and we vaccinated about 8 million people, and we have a population of 330 million. So we've got a long way to go. President Biden has said that he's going to try to vaccinate 1 million people a day. So that in his first 100 days, that'd be 100 million people. Although I've read recently that is a goal that will be very, very hard to reach. And even if we vaccinate 1 million people a day in the next 100 days, that's still far short of the 70% vaccination rate that we need to have for herd immunity. My view is that the vaccines will be extraordinarily helpful, but the pandemic is going to be with us for the rest of the year. We're not going to be able to vaccinate, all of our folks quickly. And until we have at least a 70% vaccination rate, it's not safe to have the kinds of activities that your members that are the core of your membership, forums and conventions and meetings of various kinds. So I'm sorry to be so sober, but it doesn't make sense to tell people things that aren't true and to give people unrealistic hopes about our expectations about what's to come here. We've been working closely with our Cook County Department of Public Health all the way along. That is the President's office and the Cook County Health Department and our Department of Public Health have been working closely. But I spoke with them this morning, and we've clearly got some challenges. First of all, there isn't enough vaccine, even for the people in 1A, the healthcare workers and the folks who live in congregate facilities, particularly nursing homes, let alone 1B, which would include essential workers and people over 65. So Biden's challenge is to ramp up vaccine production quickly and to work closely with states and local governments around distribution. We had 3 challenges at the beginning of this pandemic: to develop a vaccine, to develop a distribution system, national distribution system for the vaccine, and frankly, to also increase our testing. Because if you could make testing, sort of a home kit and distribute it freely to people at home, if you took the test every day or whenever you felt like you might have some symptoms and discovered that you had it, you could at least quarantine yourself and minimize the spread of the pandemic. But since we don't have sufficient easy testing, we don't have sufficient vaccine, and our distribution network is challenged, we've got a very rough road ahead of us. We'll continue to, here in Cook County, we'll continue to work with the state and meet the state's guidelines. But I caution you that we're not anywhere near getting a handle on the health challenges we face, and that will mean continuing economic challenges.
Thanks so much. And I think I was going to say a realistic answer is very helpful to us. So we all need to approach this with a clear eye to what the future looks like. And what I'm hearing from you, and I think it's a reality that many of us are beginning to accept, is it looks like, you know, late 2021, more likely 2022 might be a return to full what we might call the new normalcy.
Yes, I think that's where we are.
You discussed the 70% rate. You discussed testing. What are the signs of normalcy for you? Are there other factors that we should consider, or things that you'll look for as the area kind of returns?
Well, I can talk about that personally, and I can talk about that in a more general sense. I mean, so I like to be in the office. Some of our younger people are perfectly happy to work from home. It drives me nuts. So one of the first things I'd like to see is people be able to return to work. Oh, Lord. But what I miss most is, frankly, my neighborhood bookstores, browsing in my neighborhood bookstores and being able to sit down in my neighborhood restaurants. And that, of course, is something that's not been available to me for a long time. You know, I'm not sure that, you know, the normal that emerges in 2022 is going to be what it was prior to the pandemic. I think we'll continue to see lots of folks working from home, and lots of businesses that are able to do so having their workers work from home. After all, if you don't have to pay for space downtown and people basically provide their own workspace in their home, that's an economic advantage to you. So it's hard to know exactly how our country and our work lives in particular are going to change as a result of the pandemic, but I imagine there'll be significant changes, and not all of them can be anticipated in the moment.
I wanted to ask you, since we're a little bit on healthcare, and as we said in the beginning, Cook County represents one of the largest health systems in the country. One of the hot issues, there are many healthcare organizations within the Association Forum. In fact, the Association Forum has a healthcare collaborative that brings together people from representing multiple disciplines and industries in healthcare. One of the hottest topics is the whole issue of health equity. And as you know, Cook County and Chicago has been identified as an area where we have a particular case study of the differences in and the impact of access to healthcare. You oversee the Cook County Healthcare and the hospital. We at the Association Forum represent dozens of healthcare organizations nationally, globally, and locally. What can the association industry healthcare lobby do to enhance and help Cook County needs for funding of the hospitals, issues of healthcare distribution, equity, and preventive services at the state and federal level? And, you know, we can play a role both here and nationally on issues of health equity.
Well, first let me say, I'll talk about my own house. As we look toward my third term in 2018, my Chief of Staff, Lynetta Haynes-Turner, brought our senior staff together, and we engaged staff at all levels, and then the community to try to figure out where we needed to be going in this term. And we came up under her leadership with basically a proposal that we focus on equity, that we put particularly racial equity at the core of everything that we do. You know, we live in a region, the broader Chicagoland region, which is one of the most, which has the greatest inequity, one of the greatest inequities in the country. And we had a depression in this country in 2008. And the places that emerged, the regions that emerged from that depression most quickly were those that had the least inequity. And we in the Chicagoland region emerged more slowly, and that is attributable in large part to the great inequity that we have in our region. So the inequity that we have is a an albatross around economic growth, around our necks in terms of economic growth. So our focus, starting in this third term in 2018, was racial equity. We put out a policy roadmap, and it kind of laid out why we came to that conclusion and what we were going to try to do. So in our programs, our services, and our expenditures, and our grants, we try to focus on equity, and we brought on an equity and diversity coordinator, staff person, or director. And I encourage all of your organizations to do the same. I mean, this is a country in which there is profound inequality. We're the richest country in the world, and we also have just tremendous inequality. And that inequality means that not every one of our residents has the same access to opportunity, the same access to develop their talents and skills. And when that's true, the whole society suffers. We need to get the best out of every single one of our people if we're going to be a successful nation, a strong nation. And to the extent that people are denied an opportunity to develop their skills and talents, the whole country suffers that loss. It's not just the individual and their family that suffer the loss, the whole nation suffers the loss. So we've got to focus on equity, and we can do that in our individual organizations. As I said, we began to look at our programs, our services, our grants, our staff resources, and try to figure out how we could address this inequity. And in this budget for 2021, we put together an equity fund. And in the midst of a terrible pandemic that has led, of course, to an economic crisis, we not only balanced the budget, but we put $100 million aside in this equity fund. And so let me talk a little bit about what that money went for. 35 million of it went for a fair transit plan. The idea that transit resources are not equitably distributed across the county, and we should try to enhance public transit in areas that are underserved. So we're supporting Metra and PACE, our rail and suburban bus lines, with additional resources so that they can increase service and reduce fares. So that's one part of it, fair transit in the Southland and South suburbs. So the south side of Chicago and the south suburbs, which were the parts of our county which were least well served by public transit, we're supporting Metra so that it can decrease fares on its Metro Electric and Rock Island lines that serve south side of Chicago, the south suburbs, the southwest suburbs. That's fair transit. We put an additional $30 million into public health so we can be sure, regardless of the federal resources that come to us, and hopefully there will be federal resources, we can be sure that we have a robust vaccination program, robust testing program, that we do contact tracing. That's trying to, when we know someone has the disease, trying to figure out who they have been in contact with so we can let those people know so they get tested as well. So we put $30 million more basically into public health. We put 20 million more into the Bureau of Economic Development for a variety of community recovery initiatives to support suburban Cook County. The city of Chicago gets its own allocation of federal resources for this kind of work. So our focus is suburban Cook County, and 20 million more in our work around violence prevention, anti-recidivism, trying to keep people who've been in the criminal justice system out of it, and restorative justice efforts, trying to deal with some kinds of violations of the community, within the community rather than the criminal justice system. So more than $100 million was devoted to this equity fund, and we will be spending that over the next year or 2 years to try to meet some of the challenges of the inequity in our larger society, our larger community. So I think I've told you what we're doing, and I think you can think about what you might do in your organization. Do you have a staff person who's focused on equity and diversity? Do you talk to your members about this issue, about the tremendous inequities in our community and how they damage all of us? I think that there is a history in this country of looking at people who are marginalized, people who are disadvantaged, and thinking, okay, some people anyway, thinking, okay, we got to help them. True, but it's more important to try to create a society in which there's opportunity for everybody and equity for everybody. And we make the distinction between equality and equity. Equality means everybody gets the same, and equity means everybody gets what they need. Not the same thing. So we're focused on equity as a way to try to address the tremendous challenges that our county faces, particularly in this moment. And let me just add, the pandemic has hit some communities harder than others. And basically Black and brown communities in particular have been hard hit. And that's because of longstanding health inequities, larger numbers of people who have diabetes, hypertension, the kinds of vulnerabilities that lead them to be particularly susceptible to this pandemic, to COVID-19. And had those communities, Black and brown communities, had higher rates of incidence of the disease and of deaths from the disease than the majority communities. Partly that's the underlying health inequities, partly it's that Black and brown folks are more likely to have essential jobs in retail and other parts of our community where people still worked, whereas those who are more privileged could work from home and not endanger themselves by being out in the community. So we've got a number of challenges that have been with us for a long time and have just been illuminated by the pandemic. And then we've got, of course, challenges that are the result of the pandemic. And the synergy between those two has had a devastating impact particularly on Black and brown neighborhoods and communities.
I think by the way, this is a great point for our panel discussion and for our group to discuss. As a healthcare person, I think about healthcare equity, but thinking about equity in terms of all the dimensions that you talked about could be really helpful, since the forum really represents associations representing all sectors of our economy. So we will pivot back to that. And I think that's an area, hopefully, where we can work together and with your office in the future.
Hope so.
Really good comments. Wanted to pivot a little bit to discuss a little bit about taxes, and then I wanted to talk about the recovery of the tourism and convention industry. But first, on the tax issue, here's a question. While it's often stated that Cook County is a high tax region, the budgets under your control have held the line on taxes, and the county's bond rating is better than the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. What is your fiscal philosophy? And moreover, how do you see recovery efforts impacting your strong fiscal record?
Well, first of all, kudos to my finance team. They've worked hard for a decade to put us in the good place we find ourselves in this moment. And that means hard decisions and tough choices, as I said, over a decade. And not just my team, but the Board of Commissioners too. We've had balanced budgets, of course, for 10 years, and balanced budgets that reflected structural changes rather than one-off initiatives that we weren't able to duplicate and would not have long-standing impact. So we made the tough choices for a decade, and it put us in a very good place as the tsunami of the pandemic hit us. But let me just say, I mean, if as I expect, the pandemic continues to plague us through 21, we're going to find ourselves in a very tough place, like all local units of government. And one of the challenges we have is that the most recent COVID aid package did not include help for local units of government for lost revenue. And for the county, although we've held the line on property taxes for more than 2 decades, much of our revenue is sales taxes, economic activity related taxes. And as a result, if the economy continues to stall or recovers very slowly, we're going to be in a tough place for the budget cycle in 2022. And I can't promise that we'll be able to get through that budget as we did this one without raising taxes.
The area of concern is that we keep hearing stories about the exodus of people and businesses from Illinois, including our region. What are your thoughts on this, and what steps are being undertaken to get ahead of this in the coming years?
Well, I can tell you, that we have made supporting our business community and our not-for-profits a priority as we looked at recovery. And actually, we put together in our Bureau of Economic Development a variety of programs. Let me just run through them quickly. we had a number of programs that focused on individuals. There was a cash assistance program, utility assistance, mortgage and rental assistance. But we also put money into job placement and training to support our business community, a small business assistance program, a loan fund. We provided loans to small businesses at zero interest to help them. And we also provided support to gig workers. We had a technical assistance network to try to provide support to small businesses, make available information to them, not just about what we were doing, but what the state and the federal government were doing in terms of programming that might help them. We put together, with the help of our friends in Evanston, a food delivery partnership so we could support restaurants and those who were homeless by providing them with meals from local restaurants. I mean, we tried to look at a variety of ways in which we could support both individuals and small businesses to try to bolster both. And we'll continue to try to do that work. Actually, our connections to small businesses and organizations that support small businesses, and that includes not-for-profits, was enhanced by the demands of the pandemic. It wasn't an area in which we'd, frankly, as a county, done a lot of work before, but it was clear it was work we needed to do in this environment, and so we've taken it up.
Great. If you have a couple more minutes, we have just a couple questions, and I appreciate
Sure.
the response to that last one. We just had a couple questions come through the chat, and I just wanted to ask you that. Do you think, this is from Emily Besser, do you think the Biden administration will be able to allocate funds to localities in another COVID relief package? If the administration is unable to, what can we expect to see in 2022? And I guess that's a little bit of something that we have yet to see. But President Preckwinkle?
Well, it's all speculation, of course, but the fact that we won 2 seats in Georgia and will now have a majority in the Senate gives us a better opportunity to get aid for local units of government. This was always a position that the Democrats took in their negotiations with the Republicans around COVID relief, but they were not able to get Republican support in the last bill for basically all we need is support for lost revenue. And I'm hopeful that since there are now Democratic majorities both in the House and the Senate, that we'll be able to get relief for local units of government in that way, to cover lost revenue. Because if we don't, as I said, we're going to be in a very bad place in our budget for 2022. And there are other local units of government, not just here in our state, but around the country, that will be in trouble in 2021. And that will mean layoffs perhaps of essential workers and a further downward spiral in the economy.
I know we're running out of time, so I want to give you a moment for any closing comments, and perhaps in that, if maybe if reflect how we could help you as you consider the reopening of the county, its financial health, and particularly its reopening for major events and tourism.
Well, first, I spoke earlier to the equity issue, making equity a priority in your association activities would be extraordinarily helpful to me and to our country as a whole. So equity, I'll speak to equity first. Secondly, each of you has to do everything you can to fight the pandemic yourself. So that means wearing your mask and watching your distance and washing your hands. As I've said, it's my expectation that the pandemic will be with us at least for the next year. And I realize everybody has plague fatigue. But if we're going to protect ourselves and the people we love and our neighbors and our friends, we have to continue to be vigilant, as difficult and taxing as that is. But it saves lives. And this is particularly important because new variants of the COVID-19 virus are more contagious than previous versions. The estimate of the new strain that's ravaging Europe is that it's 50% more contagious than the version of the virus that has been here in our country. But we'll soon we'll soon be inundated with that one as well. It's not going to stay in Europe. And that means that more people will be susceptible to disease, more people will be sick, and more people will die. Just because the virus is not more virulent and is only more contagious doesn't mean it isn't a nightmare. It still means that more people will get the disease, more people will be ill, more people will succumb. So it's particularly important that we, as I said, wear our masks, wash our dishes, wash our hands. Everyone needs to be vaccinated. Whenever it's your turn, be sure you get the vaccine and encourage everybody you know to get the vaccine. I know there's some hesitance, particularly in Black and brown communities around this issue, but it's critical that we get vaccinated. Again, it takes 70% vaccination to get herd immunity, and we're a long, long way from that. And we will be for most of the year, a long, long way from that. So I encourage you to put equity at the forefront of what you do. I encourage you to take care of yourself and your family and your friends. And I encourage you to try to be supportive of the public institutions upon which we all rely. What we saw last week was an attack on representative democracy. As I said, 8 senators and 139 members of Congress, this is just absolutely extraordinary, voted not to accept the Electoral College vote. As a person who's a history teacher, that's a watershed moment for me.
Well, we so much appreciate your time and perspective. Certainly, I'm looking forward to the discussion with our panel and with the audience. You've given us a lot to think about in terms of things that we can do as organizations to make an important role in Cook County, but also, our organizations and our impact nationally. So I hope we have the opportunity to meet with you again sometime in the future, talk about the things we're doing and continue to help Cook County return to its full potential and really help advance the cause of equity across the region.
I'd be happy to come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. With that, we'll wish you a great day, and we're going to bring in our panel now. I feel like a CNN moderator. Our panel of association leaders, but they'll be coming on screen shortly. We got Kimberly Mosley. She's Secretary Treasurer of the Association Forum. Steve Smith, President and CEO of Association Management Corporation, or AMC, oversees many organizations, and Jeff Brown, who's current chair of the Association Forum, but also serves as CEO of the National Association of Personal Financial Planners. While President Preckwinkle is still here, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to direct to her?
Thank you, President Preckwinkle. It's been just phenomenal to listen to your comments. I especially took away the importance of making equity a priority for our organizations. I think that is a challenge for associations. At Association Forum, the work we've done with the welcoming environment has been so very important and so very pivotal. It is an opportunity, I think, for associations to use that as a template or as a guide for how they can build better, more welcoming environments within their organizations and continue the work of pushing for more racial equity. Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Jeff, perhaps from your perspective next.
One of the things that stood out to me last week, besides the obvious, the sadness for American democracy, was, associations are built on strong advocacy components. And, I fear that this is going to hurt our access to our elected officials. President Preckwinkle, any thoughts on, the fear and the consternation that elected officials may have by what happened last week and how that may impact our ability to advocate for the issues that are important to our members?
I think that access to the Capitol and to our elected officials is going to be tightened. I'm old enough to remember what the Capitol was like before 2001, and in my visit to the Capitol as president of the county over the last decade, one of the things that impressed me most is the presence of law enforcement officials with machine guns. But it's, believe me, access to the Capitol is going to be a lot tighter than it's ever been in the past, given this assault on our democracy, and that will make, frankly, lobbying activities more difficult. You know, I talked the afternoon of Wednesday afternoon and Thursday to some of our Congress people, and they were all really rattled by what happened. And one described sort of having to crawl out of the House chambers on her hands and knees, you know, surrounded by people with drawn guns trying to protect them. I mean, this is, it's not simply unnerving. It's profoundly unsettling, and it'll surely have consequences in terms of security in our capital and access to our elected officials in Washington.
Steve, I know before the call you mentioned similar comments. What are your thoughts and questions around this?
Well, first of all, just gratitude for your leadership in this really difficult time, facing public health crisis and, you know, these attacks on our government and our democracy as well. And I really just want to thank you for your leadership and let you know that we are all, you know, thinking about you and knowing that to be in government and doing the work that you're doing right now in a time where civility may be at an all-time low across the country is very challenging. And so just wondered if there are things that we can do locally. I know, you know, it's not all just happening in Washington, right? There's a lot of concern about what might unfold here in the coming week. So anything that we can do as citizens of Cook County and Illinois to support you and others who are representing us in such an amazing way?
Well, thank you. I always encourage people. There are lots of ways in which we can defend our democracy. One, of course, is to vote. I always say that that's necessary but not sufficient. It's the first obligation of citizenship. Necessary but not sufficient. You have to work for good people in public life, and you have to support them financially. You know, I'm a history teacher, but I move in a political environment that more and more is dominated by people who are very, very wealthy. And the only way in which those of us who are not very, very wealthy can have an impact in our democracy is, as I said, first by voting, secondly by working for the people we believe in, and secondly by contributing to them, because lots of small contributions can balance out a few large ones. So I encourage you, first and foremost, to vote. Secondly, to be involved in campaigns of people who you believe well serve our democracy, and to support them financially. Those are all things that any of us can do, and that we all should do. We can't be on the sidelines, particularly in this moment. It's important that we all be engaged politically.
Good comments. Number of questions in the chat. If you have a couple minutes. One thing I did want to mention is, you know, the Chicagoland, the whole area is a association hub, both in the city and in suburban Chicago. And one of the, including Rosemont, Schaumburg, and many other areas, one of the things the associations in this area are doing through the forum is we're building a mentorship connection. And the idea is to help find ways for students from throughout the area to understand, learn the association industry and find jobs in that profession. So it's one small step, but we think a significant step towards building equity around opportunity in the area, since association industry is generally very healthy and provides for great opportunity. Any thoughts about that and how we might, as an educator, how we might strengthen that program over time?
Well, first of all, I mean, invest in it. I don't know what kind of resources you put behind the program, but invest in it. The more young people that you can engage in any way, you know, is a really good thing. We work closely in the county with an organization called MICFA Challenge, which is encouraging high school kids to get involved. It's a civic engagement focused entity. It's called the MICFA Challenge. But whatever you can do to support our young people, it's really critical. Let me just point out in Cook County is a majority people of color county. 26% of our population is Latinx, 24% is African American. I think it's about 7 or 8 Asian American. But clearly, opportunities for communities of color are not equitably distributed. And whatever you can do to support our young people, particularly young people of color, frankly, I would be grateful for.
Great, great. Another question is, let's see, I think there's some good questions coming in while you have a moment. I'd like if Michelle could maybe come online, if Michelle Mason is there, and just chat a little bit with you and the panel about some of the work we're doing in 2 areas. One, representing the economic scope of associations generally and what we mean to the region. And then secondly, about what we're doing to unify the association community in Illinois. Michelle?
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you again, President Toni Preckwinkle. We really appreciate your leadership, and I echo the sentiments of Steve Smith. Chicago is a very important market for associations, Chicagoland area. We're the second largest market, representing over 1,700 associations, employing over 42 million staff. We have, within Association Forum, we have over 4,000 members. So we have, economically, we are a huge driver here. As you know, our commitment to hospitality and tourism is very clear. Our members are very much engaged in having meetings and really would like to see a day when we all can meet again. But we recognize that these have been very uncertain times. And we recognize that our brethren downstate in Springfield, the Illinois Society for Association Executives, we recognize an opportunity to collaborate and partner with them to unite the state of Illinois to strengthen the community. And so recently we brought the Illinois Society for Association Executives within Association Forum as a chapter. And so it's really, again, an opportunity for us to strengthen the association community and truly articulate the value that associations bring to society. We are, when we think about how associations advance America, we think about.
We lose Michelle there.
Oh, darn.
She'll be back. Anyway, the larger impact of our community. And Jeff, I'm wondering maybe you could kind of finish those remarks, and as chair.
I want to apologize. I have to sign off. I've got another Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Well, we really want to thank you for your time, and we'll continue to debrief on your remarks. Thanks so much, and we look forward to next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Great. Michelle, sorry about that. Are you still there? This is what you run into with live TV.
Yep.
But let's take a few minutes. We have about 15 minutes, for our program, and just give the audience a chance to respond and ask questions in our panel. And what stood out to me from this discussion is the powerful impact we can make as organizations, even national or global organizations, on our communities, whether it's in Cook County or Chicago or communities nationally. So I wanted to kind of just go around the panel and get your quick reaction from the point of view of your organizations, but also what we can or should think about at the level of the association forum. So maybe I'll start with start at the top of my screen with Kimberly, and then go around to Jeff and Steve.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. One of the things that really sticks out for me is how associations can be the conveners, that we can help from both the perspective of Association Forum, helping association executives come together, have these kinds of discussions. This conversation circle is one such example. but have these conversations, share ideas, but also that we can be an example for associations to do with their members. You know, that is just one of the great things about associations, that we know how to bring people together in support of a common cause. And what better cause than to bring people together to bring this country back to a better place. I think what I saw happen with the Capitol, at the Capitol, was very sad. It was not just divisive, it was it's almost like there are no words. It points to a country so very broken, and it is time for all of us to come back together. And I think associations can play a great part in helping bring people together, have those kinds of candid, open conversations that have not happened and have brought us to a place where we are so divided and not communicating with one another. So associations just play such an important role. I was reading that 1/3 of Americans are a part of an association. They're either a member of an association or an employee of an association or volunteer with an association. When that many Americans are a part of an association, that is such a huge opportunity for us to leverage that, to convene those conversations, to convene those people so that we can do better as a country.
Great, fantastic. And there's great comments and questions coming in. I'm going to read them after we go around.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kim's thoughts on everything from the internal perspective. I think externally, you know, whatever your community, your association community is involved in, you need to have a sense of what is your unique gift or opportunity that you can take into the community. There's a significant dialogue going on within NEPFA about how do we provide services to those that may not otherwise be able to afford engaging with a financial planner. And I think that dovetails nicely with what President Preckwinkle was talking about around equity and opportunity. You know, so I think there's members of this community locally in Chicago and across the country that just need an opportunity to touch one of the professionals that are involved in our associations, whether it's, you know, pro bono legal service, pro bono financial planning services, you know, getting some medical care. Those are the things that we can bring to help increase equity and opportunity for members of this country.
It really strikes me that we could all play a role. There's all something in every organization. It's really interesting. And Steve, you represent many, so different organizations. Your perspective.
Sure. Well, you know, I'm really reflecting on President Preckwinkle's comments about, you know, equity first and take care of yourselves and others. And I think, you know, I think we tend to think right away about what kinds of programs or initiatives should we be engaged with our members. And I think what I'm seeing even on the questions people are asking is just how do we have a conversation about this? How do we approach what's happening right now? And how do we anticipate what could be coming? This is not a one-time event, most likely. There are a lot of threats and things that are still active. And I think we have to also spend some time talking to our staff and our colleagues, because we spend a lot of time in the work world and we spend a lot of time taking care of our associations, but I think we also have to take care of each other and create these same kind of conversations that we're having here, or that we're thinking about having with our members, with our staff as well. So I would add that to your question, Paul. You know, I think a lot of groups are stuck right now. They're trying to figure out what to say and do. So I think are some of our associations that have offered some words, acknowledged, which is always really important, what's happened, and comment on you know, that is not acceptable. I see a lot of groups linking back to their diversity, equity, and inclusion work to remind everybody that there were things that occurred last week that triggered some strong reactions and feelings and sense of this has happened before with people. And so again, recognizing that embedded in all this is systemic racism. And this is an opportunity for us to acknowledge and, again, great conversation about what we can be doing in our own organizations to address that. So I think there's a lot we need to do as leaders. I think it's a very challenging time to be a leader. And I think, a lot of groups are still trying to sort out, what they should do. And I see some organizations coming out with statements like Forum and ASAE, and I see others I know who are working to try to come up with what they feel comfortable saying and doing. And right now, I think we're sort of in the middle of all that. So if we have resources to share, I think that's a great idea. The Welcoming Environments Committee, I like the suggestion that Stephanie made on the chat. I think if we can add resources or some sample talking points or examples of programs or communications that have been distributed in our associations or even to our staff colleagues, that could be something that would be very valuable. So we'll talk with the staff about that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, great stuff on the chat, and I'm hopeful we can build, keep this chat. There's some really good stuff here. There's a great question from Kathy Bell, if I could just ask the group this. And so it really relates to how the impact of last week might affect our individual organizations. She asked, what are the implications of what happened in DC and how our organizations might see it? Members interfering with general sessions, delegate meetings, et cetera. Sounds outrageous, but prepare for the worst might be in order. And I think this was a particularly insightful question because many of our organizations, and maybe all of them, are like microcosms of the US. We represent all views and are influenced by our political leaders. And you almost worry about, well, if this becomes a new normal, is uncivil discourse, is that acceptable? Is protest in some violent form, is that acceptable? Are your organizations kind of looking at how members are responding and anticipating the kind of challenge that Kathy Bell has put out there?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we started noticing, within some of the financial planning organizations a few years ago, Paul, where we had members that didn't feel like their voices were necessarily being heard through traditional association vehicles. So, they leveraged social media, they went into our online communities. And, when we asked them, well, why are you responding this way? Well, the only way for me to be heard and to create change is to blast everybody and anybody on social media, whether it's true or not true, positive or negative. That's how they felt like they needed to engage with association, with their peers, with volunteer leadership, with the staff. Ultimately, it didn't create any change. It didn't lead to anything positive. And some of those members left the community, but I think it's just indicative of what we're dealing with in this country. It's like people don't know how to engage with one another to create meaningful and lasting change. They're just taking cues from what they see in the broader world, and it's not really effective. I feel like we've lost something because we can't talk to one another in an effective fashion to really drive home the points that we want to make on behalf of our member communities. So it's going to be tough to recover from this.
Kimberly and Steve, comments along those lines?
I have to echo Jeff's comments. I saw the same thing in my organization where members who felt like they were not being heard took to social media. And I think, unfortunately, social media sometimes gives people license to be more uncivil because they sort of are behind the screen and not in a face-to-face kind of situation. So it's unfortunate. In our case, we did try to address the concerns that were raised in social media directly with those parties. And in a one-on-one kind of conversation, it did unfold as being not as aggressive as it had been through the social media channels, but it is par for the course. It is something that I'm seeing more and more where people who feel like they're not being heard will take to social media, whether it's positive comments or unfortunately often negative comments. And it is something that our organizations are going to have to be prepared for and have tools and ways to address quickly when that happens.
Let me, Steve, did you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to pick up on Kathy's comment. I mean, there's an opportunity here when we get past the crisis that we're in right now to to look at governance and government and sort of the relationship that exists, right? So I was on a call. I get to sit on calls for our association partners, and recently, just as this was all happening last week, at the end of a board call, the president of this particular organization said, "I want to assure you all that we will have a peaceful transfer of power next month when our presidents, we change our presidents." And I thought, interesting, right? Interesting comment. Maybe not the best timing for it, first of all, but also it is interesting to think about how, in very small ways, some of these things play out in organizational settings too, as far as people who want to support each other and make sure that things can continue in a seamless fashion versus somebody who wants an extra term or wants to stay on the board or wants to create some sort of landing area for themselves so they still have influence and power. So I do think, Kathy brings a good point. When we get further down the road, there are some interesting board behavior kinds of things to talk about, perhaps related to civility. And I know there's been some good research on that. So, but in the meantime, I think we really need to take care of each other and figure out how to support one another over the next coming days and weeks.
There were so many good questions coming in, and we just won't have time to cover them all. This was really an engaging group, and I almost wish we had another hour because we're beginning to get into some really serious discussions. What I was going to do is ask the panel, maybe just in a lightning round to wrap up. But what is your advice to the forum, to Jeff, Michelle, and myself as we go forward in our board, Kim, and the whole group? As we move forward, particularly, we heard a lot today that frankly inspired me, because I always feel, the forum, what role do we play? And today I really heard we play a role locally, we play a role nationally, and we could help make this a better environment. So what I wanted to get your thoughts on is what piece of advice would you give the leadership of the forum about how to move this dialogue forward or how to improve the situation in Cook County, whether it be around equity, civil discourse, returning the area to fiscal health. What kinds of things and what kind of guidance would you give to the forum? And with that, maybe this time I'll start with Steve. Put him on the spot.
Well, I think there's some great work happening in forum with welcoming environments. You'll learn more soon about some certificate program that will be available for association professionals who work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think Forum is doing a great job of creating conversation and resources, and I'm so grateful for that. And I love that we had a session like we did today, where we're looking outside of our own circle to say there's a broader community in which we serve and we work and we live, and how do we partner? So I just, thumbs up to Forum for all the things that Michelle and her team are doing, and thank you to Jeff and the other board members as well. So I say we just keep doing what we're doing and look at these questions people are asking and try to support one another with resources.
I would agree with what Steve has said. I also look to the forum to be an example and continue to be an example. The work that you've done with the welcoming environment has been phenomenal. It stands as an example that other associations can adapt. And I agree with Steve that there are so many opportunities for partnership, especially for small associations that don't have a lot of resources, that they can partner with other associations and together build a federation that can move mountains, that can really make an impact.
And Jeff, you get the next to last word.
I think one of the things that you and I have talked about consistently with Michelle for the better part of our term is just being good corporate citizens. We're all located here in Chicago, and we have to make sure that we're giving back in a meaningful way. And that's everything from getting engaged in the community to taking care of our people and making sure that they're supported. This is a very difficult time in our country. It's a very difficult time locally. I don't need to say why, but we need to make sure we're doing our part. And so continuing to convene conversations like this, supporting the work of Steve's committee with welcoming environment, and just making sure that the people that want to have careers in association management can find a place to do that through Forum. And I think we're well on the way to doing that.
Fantastic. And I'll just wrap up by, first of all, thanking all of you. Thank our audience for joining us today, and thank President Preckwinkle and our panelists. Please join us for upcoming meetings. I love the thread, but they do include the Women's Executive Forum, Resiliency in Challenging Times, the Smart Tech Conference involving with technology, and the dates are there. And, just check the website for more information. I just, really want to acknowledge the remarks of the panel and Jeff's last comment. We do play a very critical role. And what I'd like to do, with you all and with the group that's here and with the forum leadership is do this more on a regular basis. We have some big work in front of us. And I think as a community, our best resource is each other. And so let's take advantage of that. Let's really make the association forum and the work within our community a model for what we can do to make our nation stronger. So with that, thank you all very much and have a great day today.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.